The more it's about photography, seemingly the less it's about photography. It's an excuse to go out, have experiences, and then be able to walk away from the experience with a thing that says, this is what I saw, this is who I saw, this is what I experienced.
Yo, we're back with another Walkie Talkie. Got the homie Chris Perez. Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Introduce yourself. Let the people know who you are, where you're from, and what you shoot.
My name's Chris Perez. I was born in Brooklyn, but I grew up in upstate New York. I've been back here in New York City for 9 years now, since 2014. I shoot photos. I don't know how else to say it.
Where are we today? What do you think we're going to be shooting?
We're in Harlem right now. We're on the corner of 110th and Central Park. I think we're just going to take a stroll in Harlem and take it slow and see what we see and take it from there.
All right, let's go.
You know?
Chris, you are Dominican American, correct?
I'm also Puerto Rican.
And Puerto Rican.
50-50.
So you've been going back to DR pretty consistently for how many years now?
My first trip was in 2021, the end of the summer in 2021, and I've gone back 3 times since then. And I hope to go back one more time before the end of this year. It was not photographically motivated at all. This whole story ties back into how I started taking photos and sort of how I grew. And I think sort of why I went to DR in the first place was because, I was out on the street a lot. That's where you and I met. I was kind of one of those people in Midtown. I was going out every day. And I just sort of started to get bored of street photography in Midtown. It began to feel repetitive and felt like I was taking the same photo over and over again and didn't feel like I was growing in any way. I went to the Dominican Republic because that's where my dad is from, and I didn't visit there growing up, and I had very little connection to my family there. And so I went to a family party at the end of the summer in 2021 and found out that one of my aunts had recently moved back to the Dominican Republic. A little context in that is that my dad came here when he was 6 years old. He has 8 brothers and sisters, and all of his siblings came to this country when they were young children. That probably has something to do with why I wasn't raised with much Dominican culture. So when she told me that, I took that as an opportunity to just go check it out for myself. And it was in no way a photographically motivated trip, but I brought my cameras because I figured I was gonna do some exploring. And when I got there, I just found that I was so hungry, I was so curious about life there and the family that I have left that lived there and the culture of the people living on the island that I just wanted to go everywhere, and the camera gave me a reason to go places. It gave me a reason that when my aunt was like, oh, you want to go see this distant relative of yours that lives in the countryside? I was like, yes, please, let's go, I wanted to experience as much as possible, and I wanted to photograph as much as possible. And I had this feeling that I was able to use photography to sort of explore this part of myself that I was curious about. So that was my first trip. And when I came back, I tried to go back out on the street again and photograph like I was before I went to DR the first time. I just couldn't do it. It just didn't fulfill me in the same way that taking pictures in a way that was more motivated by self-discovery. It seemed like when I was on the street, I was just taking pictures to, go out and report what I saw. And when I was in DR, it almost felt like photography gave me this power to discover something about myself. And it just changed everything for me, and I really haven't been able to look back since.
A lot of children of immigrants or children of grandparents who came here, who I've talked to in the past couple of years, have had similar thoughts. They're on different parts of the journey of going back. In a way, talk about discovering yourself through photography. And for those who are kind of more early on in that journey, who haven't quite done it yet, but still definitely want to do it, what is some advice that you would give to somebody that's on that kind of thought track? Is there a certain way they should be going about it? Should they be staying with family? Should it be more of leave your family at home and go do it yourself? Or
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the most important thing is to be open, of course, is to, not to try to leave. When I went to DR for the first time, I had so many preconceived notions because the only thing I knew about the place, the only thing I knew about what it meant to be a Dominican person was stuff that I was told when I was growing up. So I sort of went there with all these ideas in my head, and I really had to learn quickly to be open and to understand that what I was told may have been true at one point when my dad was younger, but it's not necessarily true anymore. When it comes to family versus not family, I struggle with the idea of feeling like, okay, I'm gonna go to the DR and try to make pictures, feel like I have to conquer the whole island and travel from corner to corner, top to bottom, east to west, to get everything all together, that idea overwhelms me. So I feel like I try to stay close to my family and what access my family can give me, and sort of slowly branch out from there as I continue to go back.
Can you talk about the importance of going back, like for it to not just be a one and done kind of trip?
I think a lot of your audience and a lot of people who, you know, are fans of the New York City street photography life, and a lot of people who you've interviewed, you know, for them, photography is you go out, you get pictures, you go home. You don't have to do a lot of interacting with people. You don't have to do a lot of, you know, spending time with people, and that's totally cool. But I feel like when you go to a place where you really want to sort of dig in, it's not just about a good picture, you know? My, you know, motivation to keep going back has more to do with good pictures. It's about learning about myself. It's about learning about my roots. It's about learning about where I come from. It's about learning what that means. Pictures come as a result of that. So really, when I go there, I'm on this journey to sort of discover a part of myself that I've always been curious about. And photography is both a motivator for that, it's an excuse for that, and it's a byproduct of that, but it's not what it's all about, you know?
Was there anything with your trips back to DR that like was kind of unforeseen as an obstacle that you had to go through?
Well, the biggest thing has been the language, because Spanish is not my first language. So that's kind of one of those things that motivated me to be curious about where I come from, is that where I grew up upstate, there wasn't a lot of Latino people, and I had a Latino last name, and friends would come to my house and my parents might make Latino food or food from DR or something, or Puerto Rican food. And I always knew that people thought it was different than what they experienced at home. When I moved back to New York in 2014, one of the first places I lived was Washington Heights. And when I would go into bodegas, people would like address me in Spanish because they assumed that I spoke Spanish. And that was kind of the first moment when I was like 21 years old that I really felt like there's something about me that like people assume because of the way I look, but it's not true because I wasn't raised that way. And that main thing was speaking the language. So when I go back to DR and I don't speak the language, I really struggle a lot because I have to talk to people and explain to them what I'm doing, why I have a camera. The place where that happens a lot is on the baseball field. I have one part of my project in DR where I go to a baseball field near where my aunt lives, and the field is close enough that I just walk there and I just hang out with them and watch them play, take some photos, and sort of use that as an opportunity to see what kids' lives are like there. And man, it's hard. They're always asking like, what are you doing here? Yeah. Who are you? Why do you have a camera? Why do you want to take my picture? They're cool because they kind of like having their picture taken, but it's hard. Language has been a big obstacle in my travels. Is
this something you'd classify as like a, lack of a better term, like a photo project?
I mean, I say that out of not having another thing to call it. Yeah. It's the thing that consumes the majority of my photographic attention. I hesitate to call it a project because that sort of implies that it has a direction or it has an endpoint in sight, or I know exactly what I'm doing with it. I really don't know what it's about, you know. And I think it's important that people know that you can be motivated by a place or by a subject matter and really not know what you want to come of it. I try to remain optimistic that in time, as I continue to go back and continue to acquire pictures, the purpose of this all will show itself. But I don't want to be there with a preconceived notion of what it's about and then be operating from that notion, because I feel like that will narrow my focus in a way that may be productive at some point, but isn't productive for me right now. Yeah. If you see something that moves you and inspires you and you want to try to do something like that from your own perspective, there's nothing wrong with that. That's what this is all about. I mean, no idea is original. Like, everything's been done, everything's been seen, everything's been photographed, everything's been written about, every song has been sung. It's just what can you bring to it that's individual, you know? So I think a really important way of arriving at how to do that is being inspired. There's a difference between being inspired and just following a trend, you know?
You started photographing on the streets really because of the pandemic, right? Was that one of the major causes of you picking up a camera?
Yeah, it wasn't because of the pandemic, but it was just, you know, it came into my life when the pandemic happened, and the pandemic kind of allowed for all of the circumstances in my life to allow me to pursue photography. So I was like traveling in Latin America right as the pandemic, the end of my trip was coinciding with the very beginning of the pandemic. So I came back to New York and, of course I didn't have a job, I didn't have anything to do. Something that always stood out in my mind was that when I was traveling in Latin America, when I would go to a new city, the first thing I would do when I, checked into wherever I was staying would be to grab a camera and go out and be a tourist, photograph churches and sunsets and plazas and things like that. And when I came back to New York, I just wanted to, I didn't have anything to do. The pandemic was happening. And I just couldn't, get that idea out of my head. I guess I realized that I was sort of using a camera to discover the place when my eyes would be seeing it for the first time when I was on my travels. So I wanted to try that in New York. And so that's what I did. I went out and I photographed churches and I photographed, empty streets, which was easy during the pandemic. That was really the beginning. And through sort of trying to expose myself to what that world was like on the internet, research and see what kind of photos people were taking, I discovered the history of street photography and realized that it was a discipline that has a long history. I mean, my mind was blown at that point. I didn't know that was something that people did. And sort of that first few months where I had no idea what I was doing sort of culminated in a workshop I took with George on Halloween in 2020. George from NYCSPC. That was the moment where, I was afraid to put my camera in people's face. I was afraid to be seen. I struggled with that during that summer. And then when I met George on that day, he was kind of the first person that told me, you're not doing anything wrong. Don't be afraid of people's reactions. You just got to do it. And that's what I really needed. I needed someone who I respected, who I felt like knew what they were doing, to tell me that you just got to do it. And I benefited so much from that simple detail of that workshop, that after that, it was just like a full year and a half of just being out every day. And I think I grew a lot. I may not go out on the streets as much anymore as I used to, but I really respect what the streets gave me. And I respect street photography as a discipline, as a training ground for photography. I feel like I'm very grateful and I feel blessed to have my training ground been on the street, because I learned so much so fast just about how to use a camera and how to be confident with a camera. I feel like when my time ended in street photography, I think I had the impression that some people sort of wondered like why I lost interest or what else I wanted to do. And I've always wanted to make it clear that I have so much respect for street photography, and I didn't turn my back on it because I found this artistic passion and suddenly found that my subject matter was more important than what was on the streets. It's just that I found something that I was interested in that gave me something that the streets didn't.
So you've been, as of now, your work in like what you do as in terms of like monetary to sustain your life is through photography.
It is, as of January of this year. I know this is something that always comes up in your comment section, yep. And I've lived it. I've waited tables. I've been a dog walker. I've done a lot of things I didn't want to do to get to the point where I am now. And yeah, I mean, it's not easy. I can't say that it's sustainable. I can't say that the next time you and I talk, I might not have to have given away some of my time to get a job to make ends meet, All my cameras I paid for myself. All my film I paid for myself because I worked. I know that there's so many people in the comment section of your videos. They're like, how do people live in New York and sustain photography? Some easier than others. For me, I've had to work. From
somebody who's been a former street photographer, and you're still kind of like around it here and there, right? Because you live in New York, it's kind of hard to get away from it.
Right.
What is your kind of overall feeling or about the genre from the outside looking in?
I mean, part of when my perspective changed about things, I began to lose interest in street photography. I mean, like I said, there was even a moment when I was like at my height of being impacted by what I experienced in DR, that I came back and I would be like, this picture may look beautiful, but it doesn't do anything for me, That's kind of gone down a little bit, and because over time, my consumption of different kinds of photography has grown so much. I don't know, man. I think it's just like an easy place for people to sort of enter into. It's the easiest place to enter into. You get a camera, you go outside, you're a street photographer, And that's cool. Like I said, I have a lot of respect for that. But it is the hardest type of photography there is. It is the hardest thing to be good at. It's the hardest thing to stay consistent at. I think, like I said, for me, it's mostly just subject matter. I need to be able to connect with my subject matter visually. And And the fact that it's so random that people go out there and they just make photos of random people, that's what doesn't do it for me, you know? Yeah. If it does that for other people, that's cool, but like I said, I respect it. I just can't do it. I can't go out into Midtown with my camera and get anything out of it inside. Maybe I'll get a picture. Maybe I'll get a picture that I'm excited about or something, but inside I won't feel fulfilled. So that's it. I have no place to like say, oh, street photography sucks, people shouldn't do it, they should do other things. That's whatever. People should do whatever they want and get from it what it gives you. I may be interested in a different method of doing things now, but I apply what I learned in street photography to that.
What's your experience with like assignment work?
I've only had one assignment, which was for the Atlantic magazine last year. I had the opportunity to make some photos in my neighborhood, which was an idea that, the idea to do that came from my fiance. We've always talked about how special where we live is and how it's important that in the New York photography scene that it gets documented. So the Atlantic was looking for stories in the summer of last year for what's going on around the country, and I just sort of sent them a proposal about what I was thinking about doing in my neighborhood. They got back to me and said, yeah, do it. Like, we'd love to see it. And I was just completely shocked in that moment. It was the first time where I felt like someone wanted my intellectual contribution to something, my creative contribution.
You talked a little bit about taking that workshop with George for your street photography. Have you done other workshops since then?
I did do one last November with Joseph Rodriguez, which was great. It was a workshop about how to photograph, within a community, how to choose a subject and, find ways to get closer to that subject. Yeah, it was really great. I speak highly of workshops. I truly believe that no one can teach you how to take photos. Like, you're not necessarily gonna take a class or a workshop and just immediately come out taking better photos because you learn technical skills. Like I said about George's workshop, sometimes the person who you're taking a class with just tells you something that you needed to hear.
The Rodriguez workshop is kind of very in line with what speaks to you as a photographer.
Sure.
And like what he did with, Spanish Harlem and all that stuff is kind of in your kind of trajectory.
Exactly. And he touched on, some of the things we talked about, like about genre and street photography and stuff. And he sort of like brushed all that stuff to the side and said, none of that matters. It's just what you want to do, how you want to approach it, Yeah. Is that book of Spanish Harlem street photography? I don't even think it matters. Yeah. It's just a man who took time out of his own life to get close to a community and tell a story. And I think that's what it's all about.
Is there a recent photo book that you've picked up that has kind of made a big impact on the way you view things in your photography?
I think the book that's had the most influence on me as far as this slower approach, this different approach that I've been taking, has been the book by Baldwin Lee, The Photos Made in the American South in the 80s. That book came out of nowhere, and that whole body of work is just incredible. And every time I look at it, I'm like, these are the kind of pictures that I want to make. And what I love about it is that he talks in the interview in the back of the book and in podcasts that he's done about how they're all the photos are posed, but they don't look like they are all the time because of how natural he was able to get people. And that's something that I aspire to so much, I feel like my perspective as a photographer has two periods: before I saw that book and after I saw that book, When I first started going out on the street, like what I found so addicting and so much fun was the challenge of feeling like, oh, I'm afraid to like approach people. I'm afraid to get in people's face. I'm afraid of getting caught, and like trying to conquer that fear. That was something that that's what kept me coming out, And I always thought anyone can go up to someone and just ask to take their picture. Like, it's so much harder to be in the street and like be invisible. It took me getting to where I am now to realize that asking someone to take a picture is in some ways a lot more scarier than just taking someone's photo on the street. It's not just building up the confidence of going up to them and asking them. Like I always have 3 steps. It's like I have to build up the courage to ask them. And if they say yes, I have to settle my anxiety to like get my technical skill right, you know, make sure that the camera's set the right way and that that's all gonna work out fine. And once I get those two confidences up, then I gotta make a good picture, because they're probably just standing there like this, or they're in a position that's not particularly interesting. So that's like why I'm so inspired by that book, is like that all of that is in that book.
What are some maybe 3 things or one thing that you think is important for photographers to work on that isn't directly related to photography?
You can grow a lot as a photographer by trying to develop a genuine interest in people, which doesn't have to happen with a camera. You know, it's sitting down with people, whether it's your friends, your family, or strangers, and trying to have genuine conversations with them. It's really important to be exposed, I think, to as much stuff as possible. Put a lot of emphasis on being inspired outside of photography, watching movies, reading books, walking around places like this, and just allowing it to affect me in whatever way it's gonna affect me. Living my life, being in my relationships. I don't know if it's cliche or if I said it already, but like, I think being a decent person goes a long way no matter what, you know?
Here's a more lighthearted question. If you woke up with $5 billion in your bank account tomorrow, how do you envision you would start to change how you spend your time?
Oh my God, dude. I feel like the thing that causes the most financial, I don't want to say stress, but that I have to consider financially the most in my life is like where I live and how that's paid for. So I would just buy a place to live, make a home base, do the same for my family, make sure they're all good, make sure nobody ever has to work again. And that's it, man. I mean, that's so crazy, like how easy it is that if you just solidify that I don't have to worry about how to pay for where I'm gonna live anymore, or how I'm gonna fund my day-to-day necessities financially. I would then just dedicate all my time to pursuing photographically what I'm attracted to, you know? Of course, I'd take trips to DR, I'd take trips to Italy, spend more time where I grew up, upstate, and not much would change. I just wouldn't have like the stress of like, I gotta make X so that X expenses can be covered. And in the process of securing those finances, time is taken away. Yeah, I gotta like give credit where credit is due to photography as like something that stumbled into my life and has meant a lot to me. And it doesn't matter what my financial situation is or how good I've got it or how bad I've got it. It's something that I always hope to continue to do, you know? So when photography came to my life, I feel like, and especially like after that first year that I talked to you about, when I found a place that I was interested in and the subject matter that I wanted to pursue, I was like, oh, okay, now I can sort of begin to answer questions that I've had my whole life. I think that's such an interesting thing about photography, that like the more it's about photography, seemingly the less it's about photography. You know, like I never would have gone on these trips to the DR pursuing what I'm pursuing if it wasn't for photography, but it almost seems like I'm not even there for photography. Like the photos are the result of a deeper search, you know? Of course I want to make photos. I want to come back with good photos. I would be bummed if I came home having not taken good photos. But if I come home having enriched myself a little better about the things I'm curious about, then that's a successful trip too, you know? So I was in Italy in August, and I was in a town by the beach, and I saw a couple of guys that I wanted to take a photo of. And that's what's beautiful about photography. It motivated me. I took my socks and my shoes off and I went on the beach and I talked to these guys. And I learned about this guy, where he used to live, where he lives now, what his life was like, what he was doing there on that day, at the moment that I saw him. I took like 2 pictures and I walked away from that situation being like, if I was just a tourist right now, I would never have had that conversation. I would have been on the beach, possibly in the same area as that guy, but I never would have gotten anything out of that interaction with that local, you know? Maybe some people would. Maybe some people are more extroverted in that way, not me. And I remember saying to my fiance, walking away from that situation, I was like, that's what it's all about. The photo came as a result. The photo is almost like, the photo was the motivator and it was the thing you walked away with, but the substance of that interaction was having an experience with this other human, you know? Mm-hmm. And the most beautiful thing about photography. It's an excuse to go out, have experiences, and then be able to walk away from the experience with a thing that says, this is what I saw, this is who I saw, this is what I experienced. So when I think about my trips in that way, that's a really like positively reinforcing perspective to have, because it means that no matter what, I'm gonna come back enriched because I have this tool that gets me places to have experiences.
When it's all said and done and you're like, say you're 100 years gone, what are 3 words you hope they associate with your body of work?
Real, honest, and like true to me. That's not one word, but that's the sentiment I'm trying to get across. Like,
do you feel like you're in that trajectory?
I think so, just because I'm working from a place that's like coming from within me, you know, like I'm going back to the place where my father was born. I'm standing on the place where he walked as a child. You know, you don't get much closer than that. You don't get much more within than that, you know? So time is still gonna pass for me to really be able to communicate that visually to the degree that I want to the standard that I set myself. I'm at the source, you know, and that's something that I think anyone can benefit from, is like find the source of where that stuff comes from inside you, you know? Yeah. 93?
Yeah.
93. Let's go. It's all uphill from here.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, we got to try to get him so that it says 30, right?
Yeah.
And not 03. That's backwards.
Other way. I must have been in the mirror. See, who should not have made you do that.
Ready? 1, 2. I'll do one more. Let me get closer. Where'd you eat?
Crabs.
Oh, nice.
Can you see it?
Nah.
Oh,
Think you can give me like a serious face,
okay.
Right? I just turned 30. I got my whole life ahead of me still, right? Boom. And now just look out that way for me. Perfect. That's it. 2. Don't move. Keep looking that way. That's it. You killed it.
thank you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you so much.
I'm gonna send that to you. What's your name?
I'm Shannon. I go by Yellow. I'm a 2-time cancer survivor. My cancer is yellow.
Okay, beautiful. What a beautiful story.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
So
Happy
you too.
That's exactly what it's about, you know what I mean? Gets a little carried away sometimes, you know, you never know what people are gonna say. Bro, we got our drink, we walked this way, we had no destination, and we discovered this person on their 30th birthday when the doctors told her she wasn't gonna live, and she survived cancer twice and has 2 kids. Like, that is what it's about. It doesn't even matter if those photos are good. Of course, I hope to be able to get to a place where I can always make that photo good, that I can always tell that story in that photo. And I'm not there yet, but that's a great story, you know? And that's a great experience, just meeting somebody like that, you know? That's what it's about. And we're making this video because of photography, so photography brought us to these people. That's what it's about, bro. Be safe. Obey the signs now.
Yeah, right?
That's crazy.
I finish the sentence. I take photos because.
I take photos because it feels right. It feels good, you know? It feels like I'm able to get closer to life, that I'm able to live a life that I always wanted to live, you know? Based on interactions like the one we just had, or conversations like the one we've been having today, you know?
What do you think it means to be a successful photographer?
If you produce meaningful work, meaningful to you, and you're able to communicate that meaning successfully enough so that other people get some kind of meaning from it too, that's success.
You mentioned that you've walked around and you've kind of taken photos of like the Dominican community here. How did you kind of get into that?
Well, I first got into that after my first trip to DR. I remember her coming home and, you know, having that really unfulfilled feeling of like, I don't want to go out in the street anymore. I don't know where to go. I don't know what I'm supposed to do here in New York, because I had so much of my energy committed there, you know? And I remember, you know, walking past a baseball field in Harlem, you know, hearing music, hearing people speaking Spanish, And as soon as I saw them on the baseball field playing, I was instantly filled with the same feelings that I had when I was in DR. I was like, these people, like, I feel good being around these people. When I feel that feeling, that's what I move off of. So I heard the music, I saw them playing, and I just felt like I was back in DR. So I hung around for a while, and at first they weren't really sure like what I was doing, why I was there. I just kept coming back because it was something to do. It was somewhere to be. I enjoyed spending time with them, documenting, this particular league that coincidentally comes from the same place that I go to when I visit in DR. I got close enough with them that they would let me on the field and in the dugout and sort of be next to them. And it was an enjoyable thing to sort of dedicate time to when I came back from DR, following that same energy. But it served as a way for me to see that, in my community, there are things that I can document as well, and I needed that coming back from DR, feeling, kind of hopeless about what am I supposed to do with photography now here at home. I sort of feel a responsibility as someone who has this motivation to tell this story about what it's like to be, a person with my background that grew up in the way that I did. Because like I said before, I know there's other people who grew up like me and feel the same way I do.
So like, do you find it hard to initially make that connection when it's just like, because usually if it's people just hanging out on the block or people in baseball, they're established groups of friends or communities, right? And you be coming in as an outsider.
Right.
You've also said that you're kind of like more of a quiet person, shy.
Yeah.
As a shy person, that seems like the most scary thing.
It's definitely hard. There's no way around it. I'm one of those people who sometimes will like walk past the thing that I want to take photos of and spend those steps that I am taking away from the thing, like building up the confidence to turn around and go back and ask. So yeah, it's hard. I try to tell myself that every time I've asked or every time that I've encountered people that I wanted to sort of get to know a little closer, I've always had a good reception. All the fear and everything is in my head, It actually happened a couple of days ago. I was in Queens, I was coming back from a job, and I saw a guy getting his hair cut on the street, which is something that I've always wanted a photo of in Long Island City. And I saw this dude sitting on the sidewalk in the chair getting his hair cut, and the guy who was cutting his hair had the kind of scooter that delivery drivers ride. And he had a towel over the seat, and on the seat was all his barber tools. And I was like, man, that's it. I walked 2 blocks past them, convincing myself that it's not worth it, whatever, I'll see it again. I don't know, I just got to a certain point where I was like, I have to go back, But I turned around, I went back, I asked in English, they said no. The guy said, I don't want any camera in my face. And then I tried to explain to him in Spanish that, I like to photograph the culture, I like to photograph people having real experiences on the street, and they said yes. And I spent like 15 minutes with them. It's literally always worth it. It's never not worth it. Like 1% of the time, it's not worth it.
All right, that's gonna do it for this episode of Walkie Talkie. Chris, thanks for hanging out with me today.
Thank you, Paul. Really appreciate you having me.
Of course, man, I appreciate you. Let the people know where they can show you some love.
You can see my work on Instagram at the Chris Perez, or if you prefer, on my website, chrisperezphotography.com. And I just want to thank you, Paul. What you do for our community is invaluable. I've told you from day one that you had a great thing going, and I'm really grateful to be a part of it. Keep doing what you're doing.
I'm glad you're a part of this. So go hit Chris up, tell them how much you love his work, buy a print.
Yeah,
if you want.
Motivate me to get making prints.
Yeah, get him to make some prints, and yeah, we'll catch you another time, Chris. Peace.
All right.
Now when they see us in the streets, all they want to do is take pics, and I'm like, okay.